60, The Answer.
Get the latest weather, traffic, and news updates online at 560theanswer.com. Now, from the Signature Bank Studios. If you're looking for the latest news, insight into what it means, and the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan Proft here. So yesterday, as I mentioned earlier in the program, concurrent to that No Kings pregame CNN town hall that Klingon Collins moderated with Comrade Bernie and AOC, you had News Nation did a couple of panels over at the Kennedy Center moderated by Fredo Cuomo. And they included Bill O'Reilly, they included Tom Homan, and Stephen A. Smith for the panel on immigration law enforcement. And then there was one on the government shutdown. We mentioned Fetterman participated in that one. Earlier in the program, we mentioned that. But Tom Homan, when it was time for questions from the audience, he got a question from a Chicagoan about ICE agents and her concern that while she supports the overall mission, I mean, it's a reasonable question, while she supports the overall mission, she feels like they've gotten more aggressive. Gee, I wonder how the Chicago Press Corps' coverage of ICE has informed her opinion on that. But that's not where Tom Homan went. Take a listen to the exchange.
Hi, Mr. Homan. I'm from Chicago. And while I do appreciate all the hard work that the ICE officers have been doing, taking the worst of the worst, it seems to become more aggressive recently, probably in the past 2 months. A couple days ago, there's a large train station down the street from my house, and there were ICE officers 5 o'clock in the morning. And that's not always affecting just them. It's affecting regular citizens, too. Delays, whatever. But I'm just curious why it's become so much more aggressive, and seems in Chicago mostly.
Well, a couple of things. Aggressive, I don't know if I use that term, but there's 1,000% increase on attacks on ICE officers. Have you seen the media lately? There's bounties on their heads for $50,000 to kill one of them. So they're very careful in the way they do these operations. They got to protect themselves. So I want to use the term aggressive. They're using a lot more precautions when they approach somebody.
Mm-hmm. And he continued and responded to a question that Bill O'Reilly interjected as well.
If the mayor wants less ICE agents on the streets of Chicago, then let us send to jail to arrest a bad guy in the safety and security of a jail where it's safer for Chicago residents, it's safer for the ICE agents, and it's safer for the alien. It doesn't make sense to release a public safety threat who's in the country legally back into the public. They like to say, well, we're a welcoming community. We want victims and witnesses of a crime who are illegally in the United States to feel free to come to the police without fear of working with ICE. That is a bunch of crap, because victims and witnesses of a crime don't want the bad guy in the neighborhood either.
Amy's question, though, how common is it for the Chicago authorities to release dangerous migrants back into the population?
Every day.
Common?
Every day.
Do you have stats on it?
Certainly we do. We got a number of detainers we issued that weren't honored. If you look at the number of criminals we wrestled off the streets of Chicago, ICE has made Chicago safer. The governor and the mayor should be calling President Trump and thanking him for taking public safety threats off that street. It makes the street safer for Chicago residents like yourself. No one's going to argue taking a criminal off the street doesn't make the community safer. I looked at the data this morning. There's over, there's about, between ICE and CBP, there's over about 530,000 removals. At 70%, you're looking at about 330,000 criminals that were removed from this country, which makes this country safer.
And just in terms of the first part of it, which is, ICE agents may be a little on edge when you have political leadership that demonizes them every hour on the hour, essentially condones by not condemning violence. And you've seen any number of instances of violence against ICE agents just in the last week in Chicagoland. And this is the sort of thing that they're dealing with as you have organized and financed professional agitators and organizations that are doxing and targeting and following and coordinating and attacking. This was one phone call that one wife of a ICE agent in Dallas, Texas received. This is from the Department of Homeland Security. They released this, a voicemail, and they claim, I don't know the basis they have to claim this, but they claim this was Antifa related.
Hi, I'm just calling to say, assuming you're married to and with a last name like that, I don't know how you let your husband work for ICE and you sleep at night. You, your family. I hope your kids get deported by accident. How do you sleep? You. Did you hear what happened to the Nazis after World War II? Because that's what's going to happen to your family.
Mm-hmm. Gregory Bavino, who is enforcement commander, he's on scene here. He was called out by Governor Pritzker as having no credibility on these issues, really. He talked a little bit about ICE's presence in Chicago, including the Broadview facility. And for those, they're violating court orders and all this hand-wringing about if they don't follow court orders and, proceed through the process of litigation and they just ignore judicial orders, then who can arrest them? And this is a step towards authoritarianism. Not immediately removing the fence outside the Broadview facility is a step towards authoritarianism, and not announcing I'm about to release tear gas against you Jacobins because you're attacking us is a step towards authoritarianism, and so forth. Well, yeah. Work yourself all up into a lather. Pay no attention to what's actually happening and how this law enforcement agency and the Trump administration is comporting itself as it pertains to litigating matters in question.
That's what this is all about. That fence, the National Guard, state and locals helping us is to make our community and our homeland a safer place. That's what this whole thing is about. In the end, is to make this community and Ma and Pa America a safer place. We'll not be deterred from that, and by God, we're going to do that. It's a shout out to those state and local officers that are stepping up, especially the Illinois state troopers in Cook County Sheriff's Office. Broadview Police Department has some officers there as well. They're doing a great job. They're in a very difficult situation against some very violent protesters that we've seen are bringing weapons, semi-automatic weapons, and then assaulting immigration officers, ICE and Border Patrol agents, while those weapons are on their person. That's what those Illinois state troopers are up against right now. And then to what you said towards the fence being taken down, we kept that fence up as long as we could up until the very last hour last night. That's how important that fence was to us. Anything we can do to protect a federal facility is what we're going to do. That's why the fence was up there in the first place. Allie, when you have extremists and weak-minded individuals, the same people we've just talked about, that are killing detainees in ICE custody, shooting illegal aliens dead in ICE custody, absolutely, that's something to be concerned about at the Broadview facility or any other federal detention facility. That's why that fence was up. It was taken down by a judge. You wonder what those judges are thinking there, whether it's legislating from the bench or what. But definitely it's something we're looking at.
Oh, so they complied with the judicial order. Oh. Huh. And the National Guard is still out in Elwood rather than being on site in Broadview where they want them. Oh, because they're fighting this out in court. Like how you do. Oh. I wonder what Saca Durbin and the rest of the gaggle of neo-Marxist potentates have to say about all that. Wonder what kind of pronouncement we'll get from Jelly Belly today on that. For more on the topic and others, we're pleased to be joined by Don Tracy. He's a former Illinois Republican Party state chairman, also a lawyer by trade. He is now a Republican candidate for U.S. Senate in Illinois, running to replace Dick Durbin. Don, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Glad to be here, Dan.
So when Durbin was challenged, when he deigned to visit the Broadview facility, challenged about federal immigration law, he just retorted that he didn't have his federal statutory code book with him. Your reaction to all of this tumult in and around Chicagoland as ICE attempts to do exactly what Tom Homan said, remove people here illegally, particularly those who pose public safety threats?
Well, first of all, there's no the Trump administration is doing, what they were elected to do. They're enforcing immigration law. And it wasn't, and we need to remember, it wasn't that long ago where there was consensus, even among the Democrats, that we need to enforce federal immigration law, that you can't have a real country unless you have real borders. Obama was even referred to as the deporter-in-chief. In his first term, he deported about 3 million, more than President Trump deported in his first term. Even Biden and Schumer, were quoted as supporting federal immigration law. So, what has happened? And I'm trying to think what changed. Well, I'm thinking, maybe it's the open borders activists that have taken over the Democrat Party, because this Democrat Party is not what it used to be. And certainly they seem to have taken over the White House during the Biden administration with their open borders policy. It's just crazy. In a sane Illinois, the governor of Illinois and the mayor of Chicago would be cooperating with federal enforcement of immigration law, and we would have a safer Chicago. I mean, it's a crime-ridden city. It's the murder capital of the U.S., and it can use law enforcement help, obviously. And but why aren't they? Why aren't they cooperating and negotiating with the federal government about how to do this safely and without the sanctuary city chaos that they're actually creating? I mean, is he afraid to negotiate with the federal government? He wants to be president. If Pritzker was president, he'd have to negotiate with Putin and Chairman Xi and the Ayatollah of Iran and Kim Jong-un. But if he's afraid to negotiate with the federal government over immigration law enforcement in the city of Chicago, why does he even think he wants to be president? It's just crazy, Dan.
Well, I mean, I think there's a lot of spoiled brat in him, a lot of Spalding in him, and he just likes to throw his rattle around to position himself politically. He doesn't really care about the underlying substance of the issue or any sort of resolution to it. And I got to tell you, it was interesting what you heard from the ICE commander there, Bovino, because about ICE, about the Illinois State Police, about Broadview Police. We know that Chicago police showed up to back ICE effectively to enforce local laws with that incident on the southeast side of the city the other day. So, for all the talk of nobody wants to be doing this and nobody wants to be doing what ICE is doing, and all our law enforcement agencies and the National Guard are aghast at this. I don't think so. I know these guys can't talk because their jobs are on the line, but state troopers did a great job outside that Broadview facility. You're getting, for all the talk from the Broadview mayor about this conflict between Broadview police and ICE, doesn't sound like it. CPD doesn't sound like it. And we heard from the superintendent last week as well. He certainly wasn't indicating anything of the sort. So, actually, like law enforcement and National Guard, the people that we otherwise respect and rely on, I think my sense is that they're pretty well aligned with ICE here and misaligned with our civilian political leadership at the state and federal level. And that should be something that's frightening to constituents as well, that you have your political leadership not aligned with your law enforcement.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. But also there is the aspect that there is the National Guard nearby, even if they're not deployed. And based on the court proceedings, I think it's pretty clear if the local law enforcement isn't able to protect the federal facilities and the federal officers sufficiently, then, the National Guard is there to help. But Dan, there's quite a contrast here, because we don't have to, just imagine what it would be like if the governor and the mayor would cooperate, because, we have a case study in Memphis, Tennessee, and you might not remember, Dan, but, I, as you said, I've been a lawyer for about almost 50 years now, but I've also been in business. I have my, name on the front of a paycheck, not on the back. But I practiced law in Memphis, went to law school down there, lived in Memphis for about 7 years. And Memphis, through the governor of Tennessee, is cooperating, and the local mayor is cooperating with federal law enforcement there. And Just last week, they arrested 523 gang members in Memphis. Then they found 30 missing children. And Tom Homan, who you had quoted on earlier, he often talks about, I think, 100,000 missing children from the open borders policy, and engaged in who knows what, human trafficking, sex trafficking. And so that's just an important part of the federal law enforcement mission, too, is finding these missing children. They found 30 in Memphis last week. Who knows how many are in Chicago? And if the local authorities would cooperate, they could find more missing children there in Chicago.
It's
the Baker and Donaldson firm down there. And, Howard Baker was Reagan's chief of staff, 87 to 88.
Well,
and Memphis is similar in that it was, it's the murder capital of the U.S. per capita, while the U.S. is Chicago is the murder capital in the U.S. In total.
Yeah, no, right. I mean, Memphis has all kinds of endemic problems, similar to Chicago, just on a smaller scale. But I think that's right. I think the angle that you're taking too is to say, look, law enforcement, all these self-styled humanitarians that are throwing, throwing things, or worse, ramming cars of ICE officers. The real humanitarians are law enforcement, including ICE. These are the people trying to protect the innocent, trying to maintain order, trying to keep the peace, trying to find missing children, as you just said, which doesn't get mentioned enough. I mean, it needs to be presented that way, that the humanitarian mission is being carried out by men and women in uniform in this state and this country.
100%. You see that all the time. I mean, in dealing with the homeless, the police have to deal with that more than almost anybody. Thank God for our law enforcement. It's probably the toughest job out there right now, and it's never been tougher in my lifetime than it is right now, because they don't have, like the local governors and mayors in these blue cities, with their back. It's just no wonder they're down 2,000, I think, in the Chicago PD. But rather than cooperating like Memphis, and we don't seem to have this problem in Milwaukee, and I think DC is now cooperating. Pritzker and Johnson, they're like inciting resistance to federal law enforcement. They are seem to be encouraging assaults by calling federal law enforcement officers, as you mentioned before, thugs, Gestapo, and fascist. I mean, how can they say they're against, they're not inciting violence when they're using language like that?
So you're going to, in the general election here next year, you're going to face either the Lieutenant Governor, Juliana Stratton, or one of two Congresswomen, Raja Krishnamoorthi or Robin Kelly. I can't really identify any daylight between them on the issues, whether it's open borders or government shutdowns or confiscatory tax policies. So do you care who you face? Does it matter, do you think?
I have the same problem. I can't identify any daylight. I mean, they're all radical, leftists, progressives. They're fighting each other in this primary, and they're probably going to run even farther left in order to win the primary. I mean, to win, a primary in a blue state like Illinois and the Democrat primary, I think you have to be, a hard left, left radical. But there's, so I don't care really. I welcome the fight. I know, winning again in Illinois statewide as a Republican is an uphill, going to be a bloody uphill fight. But I'm ready. I'm ready for that fight. We haven't won since 2014 when Rauner won and Topinka won, or we haven't won a U.S. Senate seat since 2010. But it's time, and as the Democrats run farther and farther left, it opens up the middle for an Illinois Republican like myself. And I want to, thanks for the opportunity to distinguish myself. I mean, right now we have 8 statewide offices held up, and 6 statewide side, and 2 that are federal. And we Republicans have none of them. And 7 of the 8 are all either Chicago or Cook County Democrats. Durban is the only downstater. If I don't win this seat, then all 8 will be Chicago or Cook County Democrats. I love Chicago and Cook County. They need representation, but not 100% representation. The other 101 counties need some representation as well. So that differentiates me from those 3 that are going to be running against, one of the 3 anyway. They're also career politicians looking for promotion. I've been in the private sector for my entire career, either in business or in law, or both. And then also, I'm running to protect and preserve the American dream, whereas they just want to make the welfare state bigger.
Don Tracy is a Republican candidate for Senate. He's on the ballot in March and then in November against whoever the neo-Marxists put up. You could get more information on his candidacy. Don Tracy, Tracy, DonTracy4il.com. Don, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Dan. Good to talk to you again.
Good to talk to you. And Don joined us on the turnkey.pro answer line. Coming up at 7:07, we'll turn our attention to the Middle East, at least in part, when Noah Rothman joins us, talk a little bit about the prospects for a lasting peace there. That was actually a topic on that CNN